Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. My name is Edward Ornelas, and in today's video, I'm going to be covering why this is Bitcoin's last chance to redeem itself before we can potentially see it drop down to 4,000, 5,000, who knows. Before getting started into that, I would like to make an announcement that I am still currently working on the BitMEX tutorials. Don't think that I forgot about those. I should have one of those up by today, later on today, so stay tuned for that. But now let's get started and let's talk about Bitcoin's price action. If you guys remember, last time I covered Bitcoin, I talked about how Bitcoin is still consolidating from its lows of 6,000 up to 8,000, which was a 45% gain. Pretty massive if you ask me. And so it needed a correction. That was understood, okay? In any bull market or bear market, anytime Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies shoot up this high, it's in need of a correction. It's need to pull back, which is completely necessary. But I would like to admit that we did pull back much more than I expected it to, okay? And so currently we're sitting at around 6,900. And so right now, what I want to do is actually make two possible scenarios, okay? The scenario in which Bitcoin doesn't hold and it ends up going down, or the scenario in which Bitcoin goes up. That way you guys can look at the price action and say, okay, this is what I'm leaning towards, and this is what I'm going to make my bets on. The reason for this is that if you have a set plan in cryptocurrency or any market for that matter, you're able to then determine whether you're going to set some stop losses up here or you're going to set stop losses down here because you're prepared for it. All right, your mind's already ready for it, and you can always expect the unexpected. Okay, I was a Boy Scout when I was younger, and that was a term we used. It's probably no secret. Everybody knows that. But currently, let's work off of the bull scenario, okay? So currently off the bull scenario, you can see that we're still holding this upward trend, okay? And it's not the first time. You've seen this back in the past. In fact, when Bitcoin was still rallying up from last year, you can see that we've had several scenarios where it pulls back dramatically, almost 50% of its price action before shooting up. And so if you were to put yourself in that position and say, okay, maybe Bitcoin's just currently, correcting from its highs of this high, about a 50% correction, then it's completely normal. And it is in this market, it is completely normal to justify that Bitcoin can correct this far and still bounce off of it, okay? So we have that going for us. The second biggest play that we have going for us is also this strong support line, which is around 6,800. If you guys remember from a couple weeks back, I did talk about the inverse head and shoulders, how this was forming from a little while back. This head and shoulders, inverse head and shoulders, enacts as a very strong support line. The reason for that was because we had bounced off of it not once, not twice, not even 3 times, but 4 times. 4 times to be exact. And so that lets us know that there's a lot of buyers right here. So it's going to act as good support for Bitcoin around the 6,800. Okay, so we have that going for us. Secondly, the last thing I would like to say is also the RSI. So I know the RSI can at times be a little controversial. I know a lot of people don't like to base their trades off of it, but notice how far Bitcoin's gone down. A lot of times people like to use the RSI as a way to say that, okay, maybe it's showing divergence. It's not showing enough upward momentum. But in this case, that the RSI is actually showing us a little something different, okay? It's actually showing us that it's corrected heavily down here. My lines aren't really drawing out, but basically that it's corrected down, and it's giving us enough leg room, enough space for us to actually bounce and keep going up higher. Because notice when the RSI is still hitting the overbought marker, which in my opinion is around the 70, so you guys can probably see around there, that's a 70, then oftentimes it becomes overbought. So people don't like to touch those levels. But now that Bitcoin's actually reaching towards the 40 marker, it's actually reaching towards, bearing down towards the, not so much oversold, but also not overbought like it was over here on the 70 marker. So it gives enough leg room for Bitcoin to say, okay, you know what? The bigger investors that are going to look at this and say, hey, you know what, this is a good chance now for Bitcoin to actually start shooting up once more again. Okay, so buyers can then be more susceptible to say, all right, I think it's a good entry point now that Bitcoin's RSI has cooled off. And this is on the 1 day. Okay, on the 4 hourly, it's telling us something a little different. We can see that we have been oversold for quite a bit now. But again, on the 1 day, it's where I like to look at price action, because this is where we're making bigger moves. And so that's second, I would say the third scenario that I'm looking at, where, you know, it's showing that Bitcoin still has momentum to keep going up. Lastly, I would probably say is also the MACD. The MACD did cross above here once we weren't really reaching above those highs. And so now that it's kind of cooled off, its histograms are showing like it's we've already had those sellers and also low volume in sellers. All right, so that's showing that there's not as many sellers now going on in there. So there's still a lot of possibilities of Bitcoin being able to recoup from this low and actually bounce back up to 8,500 and perhaps even surpass that back up to 9,000 or 10,000. Okay, so that's the bull scenario. All right, that's one scenario that you guys can look at and say, okay, you know what, I'm bullish. I think this could be a good entry point, and I will, you know, prepare myself for a possible bull, you know, for things to shoot up again. Now, I'm going to present to you the bear scenario. Okay, I'm going to work towards the bears and to see that perhaps this could be a possibility as well, because it is also a pretty good possibility. So the first one being that we've now retraced below where initially we had broken off the bear trend. So let me actually draw this out really quickly. So you can see that we had, that's the horizontal axis. No, I mean the trend line. So if we take the trend line, and we had this bear trend that initially we had broken off of. You can see that we were doing pretty well, and when we had reached above 8,500, we had done pretty well, you know. So I suspected that we would only hold towards around here, then shoot up again. But now you can see that it's enacting as a strong resistance. You can see it tried to go up again, but it quite failed. You know, it failed, and so it's now making higher highs. And so that's making us look pretty bad in terms of Bitcoin's price. You know, it's showing that there's a lot of resistance there. The second one is going to be this double top from back in May on the 3rd. From the 3rd all the way to the 7th, you can see that we formed this double top that we have been talking about for a very long time. It's now going to enact as another strong resistance for Bitcoin. Okay. And that's going to let us allow that even if we shoot up, potentially that still is going to allow us to keep going back down. Okay. The third one being that this bull trend that I was drawing out for a little while there is now enacting as another resistance. Okay. We can see that we broke off of it and are no longer in support. So for those of you that are newer investors, I just want you to understand every single time we have a support line where it goes down here and it goes below it, it now enacts as a resistance. You can clearly see that for Bitcoin right here, that Bitcoin tried to go above this line, but didn't quite do it. You know, there's a lot of sellers, so it enacts as a resistance, no longer a support. As of before, these were our strong support lines. Now they're enacting as strong resistance lines. So it's going to have a pretty big toll for Bitcoin to show that potentially, you know, it's going to have problems making higher highs for this reason. Now let's go back on the RSI. I know I did talk about how RSI has cooled off a little bit and potentially can make legroom for us to go up. But at the same time, most people would like to say that, you know what, Bitcoin only tends to shoot up when it hits that 30 marker. You notice that back here, that Bitcoin had to retrace back to its 30 markers for us to even shoot up again. You can see that back here as well for the past couple of times. So it's still a possibility that Bitcoin could still keep going back down. Keep going, because there's still enough leg room for it to still keep going down as there is enough for us to keep going up. So RSI in this case wouldn't actually work in our favor. Okay. And lastly, I would probably say if you actually take a look at the EMAs, it's loading up here. You can see the EMAs are, as of before, when we had crossed over here on this EMA. So let me actually erase all these. As of before, if you looked at the 15 and 36, it's actually the 18 and 36 now. I changed them, but you can see that we had crossed above, showing that there's bullish scenario. But you can see now that the 18 and 36 want to cross one more time towards the downside. And anytime we've done that, where we've crossed above here, but then crossed below, you can say that we've had major downside force for Bitcoin. Since then, it took a while, from its highs of 9,000 all the way down to 6,000 for us to even cross again. And same thing back here, when we were back at close to around 12,000 or so, then we had crossed above, but then shortly after we had crossed below, and we had recouped all the way down to 6,000 just for us to cross again towards the 10,000 range. So it's looking like Bitcoin's wants to cross below, the EMAs want to cross below, and it could also show some resistance. You can see the EMAs are actually acting as a resistance, and once they cross, that'll actually confirm that Bitcoin will keep going back down. And not only would we keep going back down, is that we've had a triple bottom support. And I've talked about this in the past as well, is that anytime we have a triple bottom support, here's the second one, first, second. So this would be the third one. You guys get the point, where this is a triple bottom support right here. Anytime we try to retrace it, we've managed to successfully bounce off of it. But they call it a triple bottom support, not a quadruple, okay? The reason for that is if you keep knocking on that support line, eventually it's going to break, all right? And I believe that if we were to retrace down again towards for a fourth attempt, we're not going to hold support. All right. In fact, I believe that if we were to retrace down to 6,000, we're going to end up going down to as far as 4,500. And if we were to keep making lower lows, you can see that clearly on the Fibonacci, that we would hit about the 4,500 range. So let's go from here up to its highs. You can see that it's more or less around 4,000, 4,500 just because of this support line. So, we'd have a strong chance of actually going down towards around 5,000, 5,500, and then keep going down towards around the 4,500 range. But these are the two possible scenarios, okay, that perhaps Bitcoin's going to go up and we can still have a retracement from there, or the bear scenario where, we're still seeing huge resistance and a lot of signs are showing us that we're going to go down. So comment below, which side are you leaning towards that? This is only a small correction that we're still going to keep going up, or that this is actually a continuation pattern that we're going to keep going down, and perhaps we're going to break the support line and go back down towards the 4,000. Okay. And just like I said in the beginning, I am working on those BitMEX tutorials. Guys, please be patient with me. There is a lot that I'm covering into it. It's going to be split up into several series because there is a lot to cover in this. Okay, so with that being said, guys, I'll see you guys on the next one.